Hi everyone, I'm Amy and welcome to my channel. And I am super pleased to have today my personal mentor, Lorena. Everyone say hi to Lorena. She is a manifestation and self-concept mentor. And I've had personal coaching with Lorena. And we're here to talk today about how your attachment style is manifesting into your outer world. You know, if you visited my channel before, if you haven't, welcome. You'll know that I go a lot into attachment styles and healing so that you can become secure and have more fulfilling relationships. So welcome, Lorena. Thanks so much for taking the time to do this interview. It really means a lot to me. Do you want to go through do you want to go through a bit of a background in what, how you came to where you are now, sort of what your background was? Because I've followed you for a number of years and I'm sure that a lot of subscribers to this channel will be aware of your work as well. So if you want to go through where you started and a little bit of what your journey's been.
Yeah, of course. How far back do you want me to go?
Well, I followed you for I would say a good 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
So right when, I think it was even before you became a mentor. I think, yeah. So it's been a number of years. It was probably from Facebook, I think, I first, got into contact with you.
Yeah, so beautiful. So first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and really honored as well. And I think it's going to be a really juicy conversation because I think attachment is so important in the context of manifestation as well. And when it comes to my background, I'm actually going to go a bit further back than before you knew me, because when I began my spiritual journey, I started sort of on the Buddhist path, which is all about non-attachment. So it's quite interesting how it kind of like all flows into one another. And eventually I came into sort of the conscious manifestation community because I always had this thing inside of me, even throughout my journey of, sort of following more of a Buddhist philosophy and having more like a spiritual awakening. I don't really like that term, but, just for the sake of terminology, I still had this thing inside me where I thought we can't help but desire. Desire cannot be wrong. And so when I then got into sort of the world of manifestation, I was like, oh, this is it, right? This is what I've been looking for, because I've been feeling like things are being mirrored back to me here and I couldn't really make sense of it. And now I can make sense of it. And then I started sort of taking ownership for it, but I was still coming from a place of attachment. I was still coming from a place of trying to control things outside of myself and trying to sort of mold people into becoming who I wanted them to be, and sort of trying to control and manipulate every circumstance around me. And it actually turned into a real ego trip. And it turned into me being unhappier and living in frustration and anxiety because obviously this was not working. And then I eventually had this wake up call where I realized, I cannot go on like this because I'm just continuing to be unhappy, even though things are maybe manifesting around me sometimes, but it's not sustainable. It doesn't fulfill me. And that's when I really came into, okay, it all starts with me. I need to heal myself. And I dove really deep into my self-concept, really dove really deep into my own healing, shadow work, really took my attachment style apart as well, and healed that also, which is why I think the work you're doing is so beautiful and so needed in this world also. And I got into embodiment and really somatic work and working with my nervous system, and just created this really holistic approach to changing your self-concept and to conscious manifestation that has transformed me, that has transformed my life. And and over that time span, I decided to turn everything that I had learned and integrated and embodied into a coaching program, which is, you know, you knew me before I was a coach even, and this is something that more happened to me than something that I consciously desired to do. But it feels like my purpose, it feels like my calling, and it feels very aligned and fulfilling. So yeah, that's where I am now. I think that's a good summary.
It is a good summary, and I think a lot of people will resonate with your story. I mean, mine's quite similar, but you know, people who follow my channel have been through either the Buddhist path, where it's zero attachment, I can't desire anything, because then desire leads to attachment, and attachment leads to suffering. And but then you get the other side of the coin, where it's I control everything.
Yeah.
And I just want to sort of pick up a point that you made about shadow work, and how you really had to dive deep into your own shadows, and with that came picking apart your attachment style. What attachment style were you then, Lorena, before you healed, would you say?
Oh, I was very anxiously attached. Very, very anxiously attached. And I also think, like, when it comes to attachment styles, I sometimes don't even like using the phrase attachment style, because I think it's more of a tendency that we maybe have, because it's obviously very much changeable. And I'm still working on it, you know, continuously. I'm definitely now more on the secure side, but I'm noticing after a big breakup last year, I took a lot of time alone and just getting back out there in the dating world. And now I'm actually noticing the opposite. I'm noticing more avoidant tendencies, which is a whole different and interesting experience also. But yeah, I struggled a lot with anxious attachment, and and I think a lot of people who are coming from the manifestation community, and especially manifesting a relationship, have more of a tendency to be anxiously attached, because if you're avoidant, you're not going to go into that. You're not going to want to manifest another person, you know, for a relationship. It kind of doesn't make sense. And if you're secure, you don't feel the need to control. So I think the majority of people will be more anxiously attached. But yeah, I went through a whole journey with that. I would even say, to the point of, I'm going to rephrase that. Not, I would even say, definitely to the point of codependency. I was in a connection with somebody on and off for about 4 or 5 years, who was an addict, now in recovery and doing well. So that's amazing. But it really, you know, it taught me so much. And that was kind of the rock bottom eventually. That was also a bit of a wake-up call for me, because I was severely attached to this person, and that was not healthy and not good, and ruined a lot for me, and ultimately woke me up. So maybe it didn't ruin anything, but you get it.
Yeah. And I think it's a really good point that you've made, that attachment styles can change depending on what your life experience is. I mean, I know prior to my divorce, I was definitely dismissive avoidant, definitely was. And how that mirrored in my marriage was that my husband presented as anxious attached, which would lead me to push him away, which ultimately ended the marriage. And then when I met my current partner, I had real anxious tendencies. So it does fluctuate, and it depends on which area of your life you're looking at as well, because I've certainly noticed similarities with my relationship attachment style, and definitely my attachment to money. There was a lot of similarities going into that, and a lot of mirroring that was, sort of showing back to me. How would you say that when you sort of did your healing and moved towards secure, personally, what differences did you notice?
Mm-hmm. Well, first I want to just mention, you are so right. It also depends, our attachment styles also depend on like who we're in connection with and what we're in connection with. I actually had a client call this morning, and she has more of an anxious attachment style as well. And she's currently in connection with somebody who's very secure. And we were talking about, if somebody, even with a secure attachment, is in connection with somebody who's very anxious, they can have more of an avoidant tendency as well, because that mirrors back in that way also. So I think even if anybody's, watching this or listening to this, that is maybe more secure and feels like, oh, you know, maybe I'm not like super anxious or super avoidant, it's still worth like having that awareness and kind of diving into it, because depending on who you relate to and who you're in connection with, you might have some tendencies come out, because it's just like a very human experience. But for me, how did my life change? Honestly, I would say the root of everything, and this is why I'm so big on self-concept as well, was for me to heal my attachment to other people and my attachment to other things. I had to look within, right? Because I noticed eventually I might have had this big mirror of, you know, this very unhealthy relationship with that one person. But that was just a culmination of my attachment in general, because when I really sat with it, I noticed I am also mildly codependent in friendships. Like if that romantic partnership wasn't here right now, then I would definitely show up in similar activations in my friendships. And it was subtle and it was mild, and it really required me to be very conscious of it, but it was there. So it's not just, you know, one type of relationship or one area of life. And when I really explored that, I noticed, okay, what's the root of this? The root of this is how I feel about myself, and, you know, the validation that I give myself and how worthy I feel within myself. So when I really worked on changing my identity, changing my self-concept for myself, and really stepped into, I want to say, an embodied sense of self-worth that wasn't just conceptual, that wasn't just telling myself, oh, you know, I'm worthy, I'm loved, but that was really like a felt experience. Things started shifting because I wasn't accepting things anymore that didn't align with the sense of worthiness that I was now feeling. I wasn't trying to people please anymore. I was able to set boundaries. I was able to accept other people's boundaries also, because there's a mirror here too. If we don't set boundaries, then, you know, we're not going to accept other people's boundaries either. And it just created a lot healthier relationships all around, in my, you know, in romantic relationships, in my friendships, with myself, even with my family. So yeah, with everyone around me, really.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that you touched on embodiment work, and this is something that I do mention on my channel, because I was a person who would, you know, repeat affirmations. I am secure, I am this, I am that, and the other. But when presented with an opportunity to act like a secure person, that didn't happen at all, because I kept it in my mind of this sort of subconscious tape repeating without actually feeling into it within my body, and also acting like a secure person either. So I think the turning point for me, and I don't know whether it was the same for you, was when these situations presented themselves, I would immediately ask myself, okay, what does the secure version of me feel like, think, and act like in this situation? And I think that sometimes is the missing puzzle piece for people, because, you know, there is a place for affirmations. I personally believe in affirmations, but if you are coming from a place where you do not believe any of these things about yourself, you can't affirm your way out of it. There is got to be a certain level of belief there already, because you're affirming it. You know, it's not something that you lie to yourself until you believe it and then hope something happens. You really have to put the effort in to, you know, embody the secure version of yourself without sort of, so say for example, if me and my partner were in conflict, the first thing I started asking myself was, okay, how does the secure version of me handle this conflict now? Do I give space? Mm-hmm. Do I shout and scream like a banshee, like I used to? Or, you know, do I actually, you know, take stock and take responsibility of what's happening in front of me, come back together and, you know, have some sort of conversation about it in a healthy way, where we can come up with a solution to what the problem was. So I think it's so important that you've mentioned embodiment, because I believe that this is not said enough within the community. People seem to think that they can affirm their way into a secure relationship or as a secure version of themselves without actually taking action towards that. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Absolutely, 100%. And there's a couple of elements to this. Number one, it is the embodiment. Like, how do I show up, right? Who am I being day to day? And what actions am I taking? What habits have I created for myself? Like, what is the identity I operate from? And that doesn't come just from concepts and words. And I agree with what you're saying as well on, an affirmation it's affirming a belief that's already there. It's not, that's why it's called an affirmation, and you're not convincing yourself of something that's not yet present. And I think where people then also go wrong often in that context is, and I'm big on shadow work for that reason, is they don't fully understand their subconscious mind. Because I think oftentimes, and it also comes back to some very famous teachers that have been, here for decades. I don't really want to name anybody because I don't want to shit talk anybody, but there are a lot of people who just say, yeah, your subconscious mind just accepts anything that you will tell it. And I don't believe that. I think your subconscious mind is going to defend every belief that you have, like to death. So you will really need to rewire it by not just putting stuff over it, but by dismantling what's already there. And that is, I think, the key, because a lot of people just say affirmations because they want to lay stuff on top of the beliefs that are already present. But that can actually create more resistance than anything else, because now, it's that classic example. If you look into the mirror and you don't think you look beautiful and you tell yourself, I am beautiful, there is going to be that subconscious thing in you that tells you, no, you're not. Like, who are you trying to, who are you kidding? Who are you lying to? Why are you saying that? And it's actually amplifying the exact belief that you don't want to have. So yeah, I think feeling is really essential, and embodiment work is great for that. And also really working with the subconscious mind, building a different relationship to all of these pieces and parts within yourself that are hidden, rejected, repressed in any way.
Yeah, and you've just reminded me of a quote, actually. I can't remember who said it, but they said that affirmations used in the way that you've just described, where it is just trying to pave over what's already there, and liken it to standing in a pile of shit and spraying perfume. You've got to clear the shit.
Yeah.
Affirming over something that, is a deep belief within you. You believe it for a reason. And unless you're going back and doing shadow work to actually bring this to light, you're not going to really make any permanent changes, are you? You're going to, carry on having to either repeat 1 million affirmations a day to make yourself feel like that. But why not deal with what's underneath it? So you don't have to affirm it all day. It becomes who you are.
It
is. It's
so
exhausting.
Oh God, so exhausting. When I was doing that, I was like so exhausted and burnt out all the time. And it's what you're saying, right? You're not sustaining it, because you might see quick successes here and there, and your ego's going to love that because it's going to get this instant gratification of, ooh, I have the power, this is working, but it's not going to last, because ultimately you're going to start sabotaging yourself, because truly, deeply what you believe is something completely different.
Yeah. I also get asked quite a lot when you are doing work on your attachment style, particularly through shadow work. I mean, I know from my experience that before I did any of this work, I was put off because I didn't know what a secure person was like. I didn't know what it felt like to be secure. I didn't know what a secure relationship looked like. I didn't know what, a healthy masculine looked like. And, it was really difficult for me to actually look at, how do I experience something when I don't know what that feels like? It's completely foreign to me. And I'm sure you get asked this quite a lot through shadow work, when somebody has a core wound of being unworthy, who doesn't know what worthiness might feel like. So what would you say to somebody who is looking to reprogram their mind through shadow work, through healing, and through embodiment, when they don't know what the desired version of them would think, act, or feel like?
Yeah, first I want to validate this, because you can't know. Like, you can't know until you experience it. If I want to now step into the embodiment of being a millionaire, even if I can tap into that feeling, I'm never going to be certain that that's what it is, because I can only know when it's here. And most likely, this is why a lot of people actually get surprised when things start happening for them, and they are surprised that it feels the way it then feels for them, is because usually it feels different than you expect it to feel. So, what I would say is stop trying to hit that feeling and just explore the barriers against it, right? If it comes to unworthiness, for example, like, why don't you feel worthy? That is something that I would take apart more, because once you dismantle that, then there's almost no question. Once you stop believing that you are unworthy, well, the opposite side of that is that you feel worthy. So I think sometimes we stop ourselves because we try to hit a feeling that that just feels so far-fetched, but let's just start where we are. And I think shadow work is so powerful for that, because people often feel hesitant to really dive into their shadows. And I will also say it's really hard. It's especially hard on your own, because your subconscious mind will try to stop you at all costs from even knowing the answers, because that's part of the protective mechanism of it. Like, there's a reason these pieces are hidden, because that's what feels safe, right? But a fear that a lot of people have is that, oh, if I go into this, then that's what I'm going to manifest, or that's what I'll get stuck in. And then I'm going to stay trapped in that fear of abandonment. Then I'm going to stay trapped in that fear of rejection. And ultimately, that's just simply not true, because if you are able to sit with these uncomfortable emotions and you are really able to explore them and to dismantle them, they lose their power over you. When you asked me about my journey with my healing my own attachment style, the point that was really the turning point for me relationally, romantically, and I had already done work on my attachment style before then, but in that romantic context, there was a lot of friction still. And what happened eventually was that this person rejected me hardcore. And I went full blown, don't leave me, classic codependent. And that was a wake-up call for me, and it was extremely painful, but it forced me to sit with that. It forced me to sit with the failure, with the rejection, with the humiliation. And sometimes I think our worst fears happening to us can be the best thing that happens to us, because consciously going into that's the best thing, because then you actually avoid experiencing the fear, and you sit with it on your own, and you start to dismantle it, and you start manifesting the things that you actually want without having to experience the opposite. But that didn't happen for me. I didn't consciously do that myself. So for me, that was the biggest gift, to actually experience that rejection. So that was a bit of a tangent, but I guess the point that I was trying to make was, don't try to go somewhere where you're not, try to dismantle where you are.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And I often sort of say to my own clients, and I know that you've said it to me before, when you said about shadow work, I came to you because I'd hit sort of a ceiling, hadn't I? And I said to you, I know that there's more. I just don't know how I can access it. I don't know how I can release resistance towards it. And, I had fear come up. I thought, oh my gosh, what if something comes up that I absolutely can't deal with? What if it's something that I've completely forgotten about, that, is is going to have this profound effect on me, and then I'll spiral, and then I won't get out of it, and I'm just going to be feeling shit forever. So I think it's a really good, piece of advice, that when, shadow work, yes, it is hard, but also there's not going to be anything that comes up that you can't deal with.
Yeah, I would agree. And, this is why obviously you came to me, you were in a safe container. So I think that's important too. Like, I think your subconscious mind, the reason people hit a ceiling, the reason people hit a wall, and the reason why it's often hard to just do it on your own is because your nervous system is nice to you, and it will actually protect you from the things that you're not supposed to, access if you're not in a safe space, which is really beautiful. So this is why it's often easier to explore it when you're with somebody, with a professional, with a coach or a therapist. Because I think this is also why, there's a lot of people who don't remember things from their childhood, like traumatic experiences. And that is just, a protective mechanism. And so, I would say don't, I mean, it's easy to say, don't be afraid, because of course you're afraid, allow the fear, but know that if you don't have to go anywhere where you don't want to go, and you can take it slow. And if there are pieces that you're afraid to uncover on your own, then definitely get support.
Yeah, definitely. And we touched on fear a lot as well. And, certainly from what my research of attachment styles has been, as well as, talking to other people about it, a lot of your attachment style is driven by fear, isn't it? Like, for example, if you are dismissive, avoidant, like I was before I was divorced, I was terrified of losing my freedom. I constantly felt smothered by relationships. I didn't particularly trust relationships. I was afraid that, that my defectiveness was going to get noticed by my husband, and it was just awful. And but then likewise on the other end of the spectrum, like yourself, where it comes to anxious attachment, you're terrified of being left, you're terrified of of being in no contact with somebody because you need it. And when you said about sitting with the fear and allowing the fear anyway, and having the courage to move forward despite the fear, is really going to be a pivotal thing for you to heal your attachment style in that way, because it's not about convincing yourself that you're not going to get left. It's about knowing that even if you were going to be okay. Yeah. And I think, again, within the manifestation community, people are trying to affirm over their fears. And I did this as well. I used to affirm, I'm not going to get left because I'm amazing. And I didn't believe it. I didn't believe it. It would, sort of calm me down for 5 minutes. But, I had to sort of sit with the fear and understand, okay, well, I've been left before, and I wasn't okay. Of course I wasn't okay, but I did survive it. And, if that happened again, I would survive. And so when you're sitting with fear, what would be your advice to somebody who is sort of fearful of abandonment, who is fearful of being left by somebody? Because you've obviously had quite a long period on your own, and you touched on at the start of the video, you touched on now you're going back into the dating world, that small triggers are starting to come up for you. So how are you planning on moving yourself through this process, as along with your fear and along with your triggers?
Wow, there was so much coming up in me as you were speaking. Okay, this will be a big one. First, I want to just touch on what you said regarding the affirmation you used. Like, even that on its own, you were like affirming the thing that you didn't want by focusing on being left, right? So it's so backwards, because we're just operating from this fear all the time. And I think the key thing also is, as you said, you used to be avoidant, and then you moved more towards the anxious side. And for me, it's more the opposite. But it really shows that it's all the same root. It's all like a fear of not being lovable, of not being worthy, of not being loved for who you really are, right? Because even if you're avoidant, if you're being loved for your, even for your desire for freedom, then that's going to be respected. So it's all the same root. So when it comes to sitting with the fear, I mean, the first thing that I would say is it takes time. It really takes time, and you really have to take it slow. So as I said, for me, you know, I really took a lot of time after the ending of my last relationship, and I really did that consciously. And for the first time in my life, I also did it without, when is this ending? You know, I was just really consciously on my own and really loving up on myself. And that was extremely healing. So I think giving yourself the time you need and the space you need really intentionally is beautiful as well. Now that I'm going back into the dating world, I'm also like just taking it really slow. And I've had moments that were sort of activating. I've also had beautiful reflections, right? Me having taken that time to heal. The kind of men that I'm now calling in, it's like night and day. Like they are treating me like a freaking queen, and I had never experienced that before. So that is also really, really beautiful to see. But then, you know, I've had moments, for example, where I've had to reject people. So that brought stuff up, right? That brings up guilt, and that brings up even my abandonment wounds, because I'm like, oh my God, how would that feel for me? So I just really take my time with it, and I'm really nourishing myself and reminding myself of who I really am, and reminding myself of how I want to show up, and also always reminding myself of how I desire to be treated, and sort of operating from that. And I mean, so far, I've not experienced anything majorly activating, but it's also not been a long time. And I've seen the, you know, different reflections from what I used to experience. So there's definitely some patterns that I feel like have just been broken, that I am very certain that there's certain things that I will never experience again that I used to experience all the time. And what I would also say, now that I've seen both sides of the coin, I would almost say integrating avoidant attachment is harder in a way, because it requires you to be extra conscious, because it's very easy to be la la la, I'm just not dealing with it. Versus when you're more anxiously attached, you kind of have to look at your stuff because it's front of mind all of the time. You're not really, you're so preoccupied with relationships. So yeah, there's all of that in there. So it's a lot.
It is a lot. And, you know, you touched on the type of person that you were attracting as well, which I think is really important to touch on, because I think, you know, what the understanding is that, well, if I'm anxiously attached, then why aren't I attracting people who are anxiously attached? Because if you did, you know, you're not being shown anything, you're just being shown another anxious person. Whereas when I went into the relationship with my current partner from an anxious attachment, and he was incredibly avoidant, I needed that relationship because his avoidance really triggered my attachment style and showed me exactly where I needed to heal. And likewise with my ex-husband, but because I was, as you mentioned, because I was avoidant, I was like, no, I'm not dealing with this. No. So I think it's important to sort of touch on that sometimes it's the polarity that you're attracting. You're attracting a situation that triggers your attachment style so that you can see it. And when you become secure, you know, there's sort of like the pendulum swings one way to anxious and swings the other way to avoidant, and you've got the secure in the middle that's settled and that's stable, and you will then attract a stable partner or a stable or more stable relationship, because there's nothing inside you that needs to be triggered anymore. And, you know, and also thank you for normalizing that even though you've done the work going back into sort of relationship field, you are still being triggered, and it's absolutely normal. It's completely normal. And, you know, people tend to panic and they think, oh my gosh, I'm being triggered, I'm doing something wrong. No, you're not, you're doing it right. You know, you're meant to be triggered on these things. It's okay. And, you know, I mean, my partner moved in with me a few months ago, and, you know, my goal wasn't to have him move in and me not be triggered, because that would have been impossible. But it was about being able to accept that, yes, I'm going to be triggered, but I know that I've got the tools to help myself through it and to calm my nervous system down and to actually see things for what they really are, rather than being in such a reactive state. And, you know, I was able to sort of move through it okay.
Yeah.
And, you know, so don't have the goal of, oh, I'm never going to get triggered again. No, you want to be triggered. You want to see what's there. You want to see what's in the background that's running the show.
Yeah.
You know, it's not plain sailing. But yes, thank you so much for that, Lorena. It's going to be, you know, it's going to be really, really helpful
Yeah.
to people out there, particularly ones that are single right now and looking to get into a relationship. I think it's going to be really, really, really helpful for them. But yes, thank you so much for your time. And Lorena also has a program called Recreate Yourself, which I enrolled in and I finished. So yeah, I'll put your channel details and everything in the description box below. And
sure.
so people can nip over to your channel and look at all your wonderful videos that you've got. And yeah, so thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I'm also very approachable on Instagram for anybody who has that. So if you have any questions about anything, just drop me a DM and I'll be happy to be there as well.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Lorena. I shall see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.